It's probably best to start off with getting into what love is. Love is a manifestation of consciousness, just like truth, happiness, wisdom, peace, calm, and so on. There's nothing physical about love, like fear or desire. You cannot think love into existence. So love is on a completely different plane of existence than thought, emotion, feeling, or such experiences as trauma and karma. This is a bit like sense and the senses. Let me explain something here. We have various senses. We have primary senses which are touch, sight, hearing, smell and taste. We have more refined senses such as hunger, thirst, balance, pain, satiation, and so on. Then we have the extra senses which I'm not going to go into here. But fundamentally all senses are different manifestations of touch, contact and connection. Through sight we connect with light energy, as one example. Through hearing we connect to sound energy. So too it is with the various manifestations of consciousness. Through love in its various forms and manifestations, we have a connection to being which manifests as a sensation and then an experience. You can say the same about any manifestation of consciousness, be it truth, wisdom, happiness, calm, peace, courage, and so on. It's all consciousness, but it all manifests in pretty much the same way. You have a sensation, a connection, and an experience. Now we come to the part that many people miss. In order to experience that sensation, that connection and that experience which comes from a manifestation of consciousness, you need to be relatively unconscious. You cannot manifest consciousness or experience a manifestation of consciousness through conscious will. You cannot experience love because you want to, or need to, and if you seek truth you will not find it. That's not how this works. Wanting, needing, wishing, seeking, these are all manifestations of desire. Desire is physical in nature, and consciousness is not physical in any way. So if many people are missing this important point about the relationship between consciousness, sense, sensation, connection, and experience, then what are we doing? We enter into and continue friendships and relationships, assuming that love is part of the relationship. While we may not love our friends the same way we love those we consider spouses, or partners, or boyfriends and girlfriends, we have to think about why we become involved in our friendships and relationships and why we maintain them. We have to think about why we need friends, and why we want to be in a relationship. This is a bit like religion. I might have mentioned this before. Many people follow a religion, for example Christianity. They go to church. They may read the Bible. They may believe in God, have some faith in Jesus Christ. But they often never get a sense of why they are following that religion. As they never get a sense of why they are following that religion, they often never dig deeper and find or explore the important mystical teachings of that religion. So the religion for them becomes just another belief system or ideology. It's a very similar situation when it comes to friendships and relationships. From a certain perspective, such as that of the ego and the conditioned mind, having friends is seen as something desirable and being in a relationship gives you a different social status. If it wasn't this way, then perhaps people wouldn't see themselves or others as being attractive, unattractive, or ugly. Indeed, some people think that being unattached is somehow failing at life, suggesting a lack of success in one area of life, or maybe that there's something wrong with that person. This is why dating, or online dating, is so popular. But this is precisely where we need to do some questioning, some introspection, to properly understand the dynamics and nature of the friendships and relationships we develop. Please understand that dating is not a reliable method to either find a partner or develop with someone a healthy, sustainable and fulfilling relationship. Please pay attention to the words I am using here. Healthy, sustainable, fulfilling. There are various issues with dating. The biggest issue is that you're trying to start or initiate a relationship with someone else from the perspective of the ego and the conditioned mind. The whole point of dating is for you to compare your ego with someone else's ego and identity and determine who brings what to the table. This is what dating is really all about. People bring different things to the table. Some people bring looks and physical appearance, some other people bring status, others bring money and income, and so on. What status symbols and badges do you bring to the table? This is where we get to the transactional nature of our relationships. You need this, the other person needs that, you both need something else. You explore and try to get to know one another and see where your lives are going. You speculate about the future. One of you is working. The other is studying but hoping to graduate and find a job. How much money someone gets as an income and how they get it is another important consideration. How many children someone has is another important consideration. So it goes. See, in this scenario, all too often it is just assumed that, provided you both match up in terms of ego, identity, life directions and goals, that love will somehow manifest and appear as if to give some kind of divine seal of approval on all this ego matching. But this is not how love works. Not at all. Sure, you can buy the flowers, go to fancy restaurants and fun dates, but it's all still trying to think love into existence and assuming that love will just somehow happen. If you think this way, then you're leaving yourself wide open to the darker side of dating. Trust me, dating does have a dark side. Keep in mind, not everybody in the dating scene are who they say they are. Some people are giving you a false impression because they're just playing and looking for a bit of fun on the side. Some people already have a partner, they're in a relationship, and they're dating because they want to cheat, have fun. Then you have others, who are caught up in abusive relationship cycles, who are quite simply looking for new prey, or a new victim so they can perpetuate their abusive relationship cycles. Such people can fool you and lead you down the merry path into what appears to be the best relationship experience you're going to have. Then once they have you where they think you're going to be trapped and vulnerable, making you dependent, vulnerable, and maybe isolated from friends, that's when the relationship dynamic flips, and all of a sudden you're stuck in an abusive relationship. It's still a transactional relationship, only it's between an abuser and a target or object for their abuse. So let us not discount the reality that any new relationship is a risk. Indeed, you cannot enter into a new relationship without taking a risk. This is why the basics, integrity, trust, appreciation, are fundamental necessities for any new relationship or friendship. These are the basic necessities, not how someone looks, not how much social status they have, not how much money they have. You have no way of mitigating those risks. You can only mitigate the risk by getting to know someone. But see, to get to know someone you have to invest in the relationship. Your ego and sense of identity is not a guarantee or any sort of insurance against the risks. But even when we take abusive relationships and the various forms of cheating out of the picture, you can still end up in a transactional relationship. You get what you need and want. Your partner gets what they need and want. But because you never approach the relationship from a different perspective, you both never quite hit the sweet spot together. You never quite reach that level of shared conscious awareness to experience the love. All you have is to call your relationship a loving relationship. This is all you can do. This is where love becomes a belief. This is where the words "I love you" really mean I love you because you give me what I want and need. And I hope you love me because I'm trying to give you what you want and need. This is not quite the same as meeting someone when you weren't dating, weren't looking to be in a relationship, but that one person connects to you in a way which gives you uncanny valley vibes. You connect to that person too, because they turn your entire existence and world upside down. They make you question your existence. They scare you. So you have to change your whole life around just to be with this person. But it's still love. These are important matters or issues for most people. Life is all about relationship, which means that life is really also about connections. But without mystical awareness of the simple principles involved, you can easily run into issues and conflicts with relationships and fail to make the connections you need in life. The problem is that with social conditioning and emphasis on the ego and developing the ego structure, you don't get to learn the basic mystical principles. Love is romanticized by a wide range of different beliefs, soulmates, the law of attraction, the notion that you have to love yourself, and so on. This can create all kinds of issues and problems, especially if you are younger, say a teenager or in your 20s with not much life experience. Many people, or most, draw their beliefs about relationships from what they observed from their parents and others when growing up. But when you're younger, say a teenager or in your 20s, it's really important to establish a connection with a grandparent or an older or elderly person. Find someone who is a source of wisdom and willing to offer advice. In mystical circles, this is known as the way of the elders or way of the ancestors. It's where the older person offers wisdom or counsel to make the younger person's way through life easier and smoother. So let's work our way through these mystical principles, step by step. Love is a manifestation of consciousness which results in a sensation and an experience. You will find people who claim that love is an action, but all action is karma, not consciousness. You're dealing with two different things here. Consciousness is the context for the action, but it's not the action. The action is karma, but the context for that karma, that action, is consciousness. Just as you cannot think love into existence, you also cannot act or do love into existence. There's a reason for this. Love is the basis for intelligence. The reason why is because intelligence is the ability to make connections, and love is all about connection. We often think that intelligence is a personal trait or something connected with memory. But memory just gives us recognition, and our actual intelligence comes from sense and sensory perception, which, when we manifest consciousness as love, is what leads us to make connections and figure things out. The opposite to this is of course stupidity, which is fragmented thinking, or not joining the dots. Therefore we can talk about intelligent action, and ignorant action. This is just to point out that love is not action, but the connection behind the action. So we move on to the next important principle or thing that's necessary to know. Love is a manifestation of consciousness. It's actually believed to be a plane of consciousness that exists within you, within your being. This is where we get to the illusion of self-love. You might have heard people telling you this. In order to love someone else, you need to love yourself. The issue with this is that you are the subject of your experience, not the object. Just in the same way as water does not make water wet, fire cannot burn fire, and light does not illuminate light, you cannot be the object of your experience. Consciousness cannot manifest as love if there's not a connection or relationship into which to manifest. But that's saying consciousness does need to have a source. Without a source, consciousness cannot manifest, nor can it translate into anything physical, such as thinking, communication, interaction, or action. Consider that in order to be, or to be awake, you need to be consciously aware, or conscious. You are not conscious when you're asleep. You're relatively unconscious. So in order to visit the bathroom, make yourself a coffee, go to work, you need to be awake and consciously aware. Therefore you are the source of your consciousness. Consciousness manifests through you. But trying to focus on consciousness in itself isn't what matters, and trying to focus on it will only lead you into a mental trap. Seeking consciousness by itself, or a manifestation of consciousness, is a fairly reliable way of not finding it. Seeking love is a reliable means of preventing an experience of love. As stated previously, consciousness is not physical existence, it's not karma, it's not action. It's got nothing to do with conscious will. So what you need to do is to center yourself in being, on your senses, sensory input, and felt sense of immediate experience. Most people center themselves on their ego, which is centered on memory and imagination. If you are centered on your ego and not on sense, then you leave yourself wide open and vulnerable to deception and self-deception. You'll find it really difficult to tell the difference between love and infatuation, or connection and attachment. Being centered on ego is how many people miss out on the actual experience of love, and they usually end up in a relationship which is based on an imitation of love. There is a difference. But if you are centered in being, in senses, your felt sense of immediate experience, and you understand that your ego isn't real, but just role play, then it's harder to deceive yourself or be deceived by others. The basis of thought is fear and desire, and if you are signaling either fear or desire through having an expectation about life, then it's much easier to be deceived or fooled. When a relationship or dating experience breaks down or falls apart, it's the unfulfilled expectations which cause the emotional and psychological trauma. This is what creates the psychological mess and fallout. When you're centered on sense and not on ego, and essentially pursuing a general strategy of non-attachment in life, it becomes much easier to manifest consciousness through being centered on being. You yourself are not manifesting anything, but are merely being a vessel or channel through which life manifests all by itself. When you are aligned with your environment and others, life and consciousness manifest all by themselves. This is what is known as the flow of life. Reality manifests as the context for existence, and out of existence being manifests. For something to exist or come into being, or manifest, there needs to be a source. Existence cannot exist without reality, and there can be no being without existence. I'm laboring the point here, but I'm pointing out a very important mystical principle. If there is no source, then there is no existence or being. Life starts with an environment. If there is no planet and no environment, then you cannot exist. You also cannot exist if there are no other human beings. You exist as a human being because other human beings exist. So, for consciousness to manifest as love, love has to manifest first with you as a source, which means that it needs to manifest from within you, within your being. A manifestation of love can manifest as kindness, as empathy, as basic humanity, as devotion, as so many other forms of love. These various manifestations of love need to manifest through your thinking, through your actions, though how you interact with others, so that love and loving intent becomes the context for your actions, thinking and behavior, which you express outwards through your connection and relationship with your environment and others. But here it's important to understand that consciousness isn't like energy but is spontaneous, random, an event, a happening. Energy is simple, straightforward, a matter of wavelength, frequency and relationship. Consciousness is not like that. Consciousness can manifest as love, as truth, as wisdom, as happiness, as light, as peace, as calm. You have no way of knowing how consciousness will manifest until you have experienced the sensation and direct experience. Without that sensation and experience, you have nothing to talk about. Therefore, you cannot directly manifest consciousness as love. It's far too simplistic to seek to love everybody and sing Kumbaya. There also needs to be integrity, there needs to be trust, there needs to be appreciation, there also needs to be style and taste. You cannot have a loving relationship with anyone without integrity, without trust, without appreciation. What I'm pointing out here is that you need to be centered on sense and your felt sense of immediate experience, in your being, and not on your ego, and just let life flow through you. So this is where we come to the actual truth, or foundation principle. If you want to experience love through relationship, you yourself have to be the original source of that consciousness which manifests as love. Just like trust, appreciation, integrity and other manifestations of consciousness needs to flow out from its source, which is your being. This means that you need to manifest kindness, empathy, integrity, and so on through your thinking, behavior and interaction. You have to find ways of connecting to other people through these manifestations of consciousness. But there's another side to all this. Please keep in mind that nature abhors a vacuum. So, in order to manifest consciousness, you need to be relatively unconscious. In other words, You need to take your eye off the ball. You want to find yourself in a loving relationship, then you've got to stop thinking about being in a loving relationship. You still have to manifest consciousness out from being. This is called being centered. You don't think about a loving relationship because you have to allow someone else to make a connection. It's a bit like Bluetooth. Just as you need to have your smartphone on to connect to your earbuds have to make the connection to your smartphone. Love works in pretty much the same way. This is why online dating rarely ever results in a truly loving relationship. Whenever you're swiping left or right, you're simply making choices based on desire and preferences, and dating itself is just another ego trip. Dating is fine if you want a transactional relationship or to play at having a loving relationship, but it doesn't necessarily lead to a loving relationship. Please keep in mind that a loving relationship will generally hit you out of the blue, when you're at work, out shopping for groceries, or traveling or public transport. The big illusion is that you can find a loving relationship as easily as you can buy a loaf of bread. Not true. Love is far more mysterious than that.